People of Reddit who have gone through or are going through cancer, what was the first sign that made you go to the doctor? I was about 12 and I noticed a grey spot in my left eye, so I went to the eye doctor. It turned out to be retinoblastoma. And fast forward about 1 week I had my eye removed and started chemo. And now have a glass eye that has to get redone every 2 years. I had a persistent pain in the middle of my sternum. Doctors thought it was costochondritis, essentially just inflammation of a joint. I stopped working out and lifting heavy things for 3 months, but it didn't go away. Eventually I started having night sweats and random aches. After I fractured my hip, I got an MRI and biopsy and they diagnosed me with stage 4 non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. I got chemo and I've been in remission for 5 years. My dad went to the ER after a big bump had formed on his neck overnight. He was prescribed severe rash medication but went back after nothing had worked. Everyone, even the doctors, thought it had been an allergic reaction or some kind of rash, but after testing for other causes, they found that he had had Hodgkin's lymphoma and a 6-inch mass in his chest. It has been over a year, he was finished treatment, and the cancer shows no sign of returning. Last year, March 201, I, male, 35, woke up in the morning to go to the toilet. I was urinating pure, thick blood with little lumps in it. So after a severe panic attack it began to hurt like hell. I was throwing up from the pain. After a day in the hospital and some scans and tests later, they told me to call my parents. So you know you're getting some bad news. It turns out it was kidney cancer. They removed my right kidney, fortunately no other treatments were needed, and I'm living the best life right now. If the tumor in my kidney didn't started to bleed I would have found out much later, probably too late. Seizures. I got seizures out of nowhere during the night. No history of seizures in my family. Got my head screened and they found what they thought to be a benign tumor. Anaplastic astrocytoma, diagnosed 2 months before my 22nd birthday. Nearing the 5-year mark, though, with no evidence of it returning. I was diagnosed at 43. For 2 years my gynecologist insisted that I get a mammogram as part of turning 40. I am very small-chested, so I thought it was a complete waste of time. In February 2013 I promised my doctor that I would get a mammogram before my next annual appointment. I was diagnosed in February 2014. Stage 2 breast cancer. There was absolutely no signs or indication. No family history. All the way up to the pathology results from the biopsy, I thought it was all a complete waste of time and money. The results came back positive. My brother was 11 when he started experiencing symptoms. He started losing a lot of weight, and when he was playing soccer it looked like he was running through mud and couldn't keep up with everyone else. My parents took him to the pediatrician and they couldn't figure out what was wrong. One day, he woke up and couldn't stop throwing up. When he tried to run to the bathroom, he kept running into the door frame and couldn't walk straight. He said the lights were giving him a headache. We took him to the emergency room and they found that he had a brain tumor, and had emergency brain surgery the next day. We were extremely lucky that they decided to do a CAT scan at the ER, apparently they don't usually do them on kids. 2 brain surgeries and a 1.5 years of chemo later, and he is in remission now. I went to my GP for blood in my stool but they didn't give me any examine and presumed it was a fissure, but dear from straining. I also had side pain and again wasn't looked into, and I had fatigue. Doctors again didn't investigate. They told me as I'm young, 27, it wasn't a problem. One day I was at work, I had agony in my abdomen. My manager said I was pale. Went A&E, was kept in overnight and turned out I have a very rare stage 4 bowel cancer which has spread to elsewhere in my body. Got my diagnosis a week later and was on the operating table to remove a large part of my colon the following Monday. Now on chemotherapy and tried to complain about my GP and they removed my review from their website, NHS Choices.
I had childhood leukemia. When I was about 10, both of my knees started to hurt progressively more and more to the point where I was limping around. I also couldn't catch my breath. I remember this one lunch lady at school giving me shit for being slow walking up some stairs, and I just didn't know what to tell her because I couldn't go any faster. I went to the doctor once and they said I sprained my knees. I played soccer, so it wasn't impossible. But they never got better. So I went back and they decided to take some blood tests just in case. Thankfully they did, because it turns out my red blood cells were 1/3 what they were supposed to be, hence why I couldn't heal and I couldn't get enough oxygen, ever. That was 20 years ago now, and I got lucky, I didn't relapse. I had friends who did, and didn't make it. I don't know. Kinda a personal story that I don't talk about much.
On Christmas Eve 2018, my dad lost the ability to talk except for the phrase "this is crazy." Called paramedics because we thought he'd had a stroke. Got him to the hospital where the imaging showed a brain tumor on the outside edge of his brain. The swelling caused him to have a seizure. He was transferred to a bigger local hospital. They did full body scans because it's pretty rare to just have brain cancer. Usually it's a secondary for another cancer site. We got lucky in that it was the sole spot. Went through a craniotomy, and 5 rounds of high-dose inpatient chemo, and he's 1 year in remission. My dad was acting strange. He looked disheveled somewhat and was telling the same stories. Well, he's 86, that can come with age. But he was also swerving on the road driving, and he called me one day to take him to his doctor. Long story short, stage 4 GBM. Brain cancer. Had surgery, was okay for a couple of months but was gone a couple months after that. Good part was, had no pain and didn't suffer. Testicular cancer survivor here. I had a dull pain one day in my right testicle. Didn't think much of it. I then took a shower and my ball felt different. It wasn't smooth. I just felt that something was different. I went to my doctor and asked him to check them to make sure things were normal. He did the check and didn't think things felt off but ordered an ultrasound anyway. I went and did the ultrasound, and I didn't hear what they found. They just asked me to go back for another ultrasound. The next day I got told I had to go to the hospital to see the urologist. Within minutes of meeting the doctor, he told me I had testicular cancer and was having surgery that night. It happened so fast. I caught mine early. Now I tell everyone to feel your balls and know you're normal. My dad woke up with extremely sharp pain in his abdomen. Worst pain you can imagine, apparently, when you have a tumor blocking your intestinal tract. It wasn't until the pain actually woke him from deep sleep that he went to emergency room and they found it. He ignored any other pain up until then. Don't ignore your pain. It was a few years of absolute misery and now we miss him. Cervix cancer. A couple of times during sex blood would just randomly pour out of me. Nowhere near my time of month and no pain. Turns out that is one of the warning signs. 3 surgeries later I have had my cervix, the mouth the uterus, removed completely, bit by bit. They tried taking only what they had to, as lack of a cervix makes impregnation and carrying to term harder, but it kept reappearing. I hope it's done now. I was rubbing my thigh with my hands after exercise and I felt a hard, painless lump the size of a big jelly bean about 5 centimeters deep under my skin. I felt around in the same spot on the opposite leg and didn't find another one, so I went to the doctor. A bunch of scans later, I was diagnosed with myxoid sarcoma. It turned out to be a misdiagnosis as the tumor ended up being benign, but I still needed surgery and the nerves in my leg got fucked up. TLDR, if something about your body feels off, get it checked out. If my tumor had have been cancer, my prognosis still would have been very good because I noticed it when it was still small. Back in 2017, I had been having back pain for several months. I finally went to urgent care one day when the pain was unbearable. They sent me immediately to the ER. I was admitted to the hospital and was diagnosed with stage 4 breast cancer. It had spread to my liver and bones. My life completely changed that day. When faced with dying, I realized that I wanted to live. Before this, I had my suicide completely planned out. I feel like things happen for a reason and things work out the way they are supposed to. I'm a new person today. I spend every day fighting for a life that I wanted to throw away. My mom found out she has cancer a week ago. At first she felt pain in her armpit and naturally she did some research and found out that the people who have pain in the same spot have cancer. However, I didn't give it much thought as every cancer diagnosis is different. The next day she went to the doctor, turns out it's a tumor. The week after she tested the tumor to see if it's cancerous and sadly it was. Tomorrow the doctor will tell her the plan for recovery. Please pray for her fast recovery. My mother began having numbness in her hand and that became more frequent and it led to loss of control. She was a heavy smoker and always coughed but apparently the cancer started in her lungs. My aunt had chronic pneumonia and then they realized she had cancer too. This was 7 years later and they were identical twins. Both smoked. My mother was also a drug, speed user though. My cousin had throat cancer and that was diagnosed pretty early and she beat it. She was having recurring throat infections and loss of voice. But cancer disqualifies you from organ transplants. They all lived in the same house. I am now selling that house. My 33-year-old husband was diagnosed with inoperable glioblastoma, most aggressive brain cancer, in January 2019, when he was 31. What caused him to get a check was persistent headache that didn't go away with paracetamols and sleep. We discovered the tumors after taking an MRI. Needless to say, our lives were changed forever. Now we are at the end of our journey, and it's been a harrowing experience for me as his wife and caregiver. It's a lonely journey. I don't wish it upon anyone and no one has any idea what glioblastoma is like, unless they have gone through it. The median survival time is 14-18 months. We are on our 18th month now. And given days/weeks left. Every day is a gift. And I'm glad I get to be holding his hands every day, even if he's resting and sleeping most of the time. As long as he is not in pain, and that the morphine patches are working, that is fine by me. I can't handle him going through any more pain.
Grandmother one suddenly developed a lot of pain, seemingly from nowhere. She also felt completely drained of energy. Went to the doctor and was soon diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. She died 2 months later. Grandmother 2 started experiencing tummy issues. Pain, cramps, upset stomach, painful and foul-smelling gas. Turned out to be bowel cancer. Had it surgically removed and has been in remission for about 15 years now. She has since been diagnosed with IBS though, and because some symptoms match the symptoms she experienced with the cancer, she is so scared that it's come back. Goes to see several specialists a year on her own insistence because of anxiety about recurrence. Her IBS would be better if she didn't insist on loading up with every type of fiber there is, but she's so scared of dying now that she insists on eating 10 types of fiber and 50 pieces of fruit and veg every day. This makes her IBS flare up which triggers her anxiety which makes her eat healthier etc. Vicious cycle. Grandfather experienced some clotting issues, bruising etc., was diagnosed with a type of leukemia that was very non-malevolent, it posed no real danger. Then a year later he developed pneumonia and the antibiotics he was given for it wouldn't work somehow because of the leukemia. He died about a week later. All but one grandparent have had some type of cancer so I'm not all that optimistic about dodging that bullet myself. Only time will tell, I guess.